Mia had it all, or at least that's what her followers believed. To her hundreds of thousands of fans, she was the perfect image of beauty, confidence, and success. Her flawless selfies, carefully curated fashion, and charming personality gave people something to aspire to, admire, even envy. But behind the screen, Mia was anything but flawless. As she stared into the mirror, wiping away layers of makeup and letting her carefully constructed image fade, she saw the version of herself she kept hidden from the world. Beneath the glamour was someone haunted by self-doubt, insecurity, and an overwhelming fear of being unwanted. She wasn't the confident influencer her followers thought she was. She was simply a young woman who, from a young age, had learned to hide behind masks. In truth, Mia had always been terrified of being seen for who she truly was. Memories from her childhood crept back, memories she rarely let surface. Being the shy, invisible girl in school, passed over by her peers, left out of the things she longed to be part of. Back then, she believed that if she could become beautiful, popular, and perfect, she would finally be accepted. She would finally be worthy. So, she crafted her persona carefully, constructing a flawless image that she hoped would shield her from the painful reality of feeling like she wasn't enough. But over time, the price of living behind this mask began to take its toll. The likes, comments, and compliments had started to feel hollow, like echoes in an empty room. No amount of followers or admiration could fill the void she felt inside. Her social media presence had become a mirror of her deepest fear, that if people ever truly saw her, they would turn away. Desperate to find something real, something that went beyond the shallow world she'd built around herself, Mia decided to embark on a personal experiment. She wanted to see if someone could care about her without the makeup, without the fashion, without the Instagram-ready smile. So, she devised a plan. She would use her makeup artistry to transform herself into a different version of herself, one that wasn't polished or perfect. She would present herself to the world without the glamorous facade, hoping that maybe someone might see beyond it. With her mind set on the experiment, Mia took a deep breath and began her transformation. Using her skills as a makeup artist, she muted her striking features, trading her usual polished look for one that was simpler, almost plain. She ditched her signature bold eyeliner, swapped her designer clothes for thrifted jeans and a simple sweatshirt, and left her hair natural. She wanted to be unrecognizable, free from the image that had defined her for so long. As she walked out into the world as this new, unembellished version of herself, Mia felt both vulnerable and oddly liberated. For the first time in years, she wasn't bound by the pressure to look perfect or keep up appearances. She was just Mia. Her first stop was a local coffee shop, where she planned to sit, relax, and take in the world as someone who could blend into the background. And that's where she met Ethan. Ethan was not the type Mia usually encountered in her social circle. He wasn't flashy or arrogant. Instead, he had a quiet, thoughtful energy about him. Sitting alone with a notebook and a coffee, he seemed deep in thought, sketching something with intense focus. His hands were rough from hard work, and his clothes were simple yet well-worn. Ethan was a props designer for the film industry, working behind the scenes to create the worlds and characters that other people got to see. Mia noticed him glancing at her a few times, curiosity flickering in his gaze, but he didn't approach her. Instead, he returned to his sketch, lost in his world. Mia felt a pull, a strange sense of calm around him. She wanted to know more about him, drawn to the authenticity she sensed, the kind that didn't depend on outward appearance. Gathering her courage, she walked over and introduced herself. "Hey, I couldn't help but notice you drawing. Are you an artist?" Ethan looked up, surprised. Yeah, kind of. I design props for movies, so it's part of the job. I'm actually just sketching some ideas for a new project right now." His voice was steady, but there was a hint of modesty, like he wasn't used to being noticed. "That's incredible," Mia said, genuinely intrigued. "I've always admired people who can bring imagination to life. So, do you come here often to work?" He smiled, a little embarrassed. "Yeah, it's one of my favorite places. There's something about the energy here that helps me think." They continued talking, and for the first time in a long while, Mia found herself sharing stories without filtering her words, laughing without overthinking how she looked or sounded. With Ethan, she felt at ease. He didn't know her as Mia, the influencer. To him, she was just a curious stranger, and it was thrilling in a way she hadn't expected. As they parted ways, Ethan gave her a warm smile and said, "It was nice meeting you. Maybe I'll see you around here again." Mia couldn't stop smiling as she walked away. There was something about Ethan that felt genuine, something that made her want to know him better. But as she returned home and glanced at her phone, she saw notifications piling up on her social media, reminders of the glamorous life she'd built. She wondered if she could really leave it all behind, even if just for a while. For now, she decided to let things unfold naturally. She'd see Ethan again, of that she was sure, but she'd keep her true identity hidden. It was her experiment after all, and she was determined to see it through. Days turned into weeks, and Mia found herself returning to the coffee shop, hoping to run into Ethan again. Each encounter felt like a gift, a small escape from her carefully managed life online. Ethan was refreshing in a way she hadn't anticipated. He was passionate about his work, with a quiet confidence and humility that only grew as she got to know him. And, even more surprising to Mia, he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, her ideas, things she'd long hidden under layers of social media perfection. With Ethan, Mia felt like she could be herself. They talked about everything, their favorite childhood memories, their dreams, and even their fears. She confided in him about her fascination with vintage items, especially old keys she'd collected from thrift shops, each one holding a mystery she loved to imagine. Ethan listened intently, sharing stories of his own unusual interests, like collecting props from movie sets or designing imaginary worlds for future projects. They laughed, shared awkward stories, and bonded over their mutual appreciation for quirky, often overlooked things. As they spent more time together, Mia began to question her online persona. She felt like she was leading a double life, one where she could be her true self with Ethan, and another where she played the role of a flawless influencer, chasing likes and validation from strangers. The contrast between these worlds was beginning to pull her apart. She wondered if she was strong enough to keep up the facade without losing herself in the process. One evening, as they shared a casual dinner at a small, dimly lit cafe, Ethan looked at her with a gentleness that disarmed her. "You know, Mia, there's something different about you," he said softly. "I can't quite put my finger on it, but you're real. You don't seem to care about impressing people, that's rare." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She knew he was seeing the real her, and it terrified her. How could she let him in when he had no idea about her life outside of these walls, her life as a social media star? Just then, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down, seeing her notifications lighting up the screen. New comments, likes, and messages flooded her feed, all pulling her back to the online persona she'd built. She quickly flipped her phone over, feeling a wave of guilt rise within her. Here she was, living two lives, one with Ethan, honest and raw, and one with her followers, where she was nothing but the polished, perfect version of herself. Ethan noticed her reaction. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern flickering in his eyes. "Yeah, just work stuff," Mia said, forcing a smile. She hated lying to him, but she wasn't ready to reveal the truth. Not yet. The walls of her dual existence were closing in, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep up the act. But the thought of losing Ethan was too painful to bear. As they parted ways that night, Ethan surprised her with a small gift. He handed her a beautifully crafted, antique-style key, one he had designed himself. "I thought of you when I made this," he said shyly. "Maybe it'll unlock something special for you someday." Mia's heart ached as she took the key. She thanked him, hiding the turmoil within her. This small token of kindness, so thoughtful and genuine, was a stark reminder of what she risked losing if she couldn't find a way to reconcile the person she truly was with the life she pretended to lead. Mia knew she had to make a choice, but she wasn't sure she was ready, and as she clutched the key in her hand, She realized that keeping her secret from Ethan could shatter everything she'd found with him. Mia's growing connection with Ethan was becoming the brightest part of her days, but her double life was also becoming harder to manage. The more genuine moments she shared with Ethan, the more strained her influencer persona felt. She'd scroll through her social media feed at night, feeling less connected to the images she posted, the staged smiles and glamorous outfits. It was like looking at a stranger, a perfect version of herself she no longer wanted to be. Just as Mia was grappling with these feelings, an unwelcome blast from her past returned. Derek, her ex-boyfriend. Derek had once been the center of Mia's world, but his toxic, self-centered personality had nearly destroyed her self-esteem. He had a way of making her feel unworthy, reminding her of all the reasons she wasn't good enough for the glamorous life she'd built. It was only after their painful breakup that Mia had thrown herself fully into her influencer career, determined to prove, to herself and to him, that she could be everything he said she wasn't. So, when Derek unexpectedly called her, asking to meet for coffee, Mia hesitated. She knew he wasn't good for her, but curiosity and a lingering need for closure drew her in. When they met, Derek was his usual self, charming, a bit arrogant, and entirely unaware of the damage he had once caused. "Mia," he said, smiling as he leaned back in his chair, "you look great. Really pulled yourself together since, well, you know." His words, laced with that subtle condescension, stung, but Mia tried to ignore it. "Thanks, Derek," she replied, forcing a polite smile. "I've been doing well. I actually have a lot going on right now." "Oh, I know," he said, glancing at his phone. "I follow you, remember? Quite the little influencer you've become." He laughed, a hint of mockery in his tone. "I just hope you haven't forgotten where you came from. It's easy to get a little carried away with all the attention." Mia's stomach tightened. Derek's words were laced with the same undercurrent of doubt he had always used to keep her feeling small. It was as if he could sense the vulnerability she felt lately, the questioning of her own worth behind the mask she wore online. "Actually, I haven't forgotten anything, Derek," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've worked hard for everything I have." Derek raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Oh, I know. Just remember, people only stick around while you're interesting. The second you slip up, they'll move on. Don't kid yourself." The words echoed in her mind long after she left the cafe. Despite all she had achieved, Derek's comments made her doubt herself, reigniting the insecurities she thought she'd outgrown. Suddenly, her relationship with Ethan felt fragile, her real self unworthy of being seen. In the following days, Derek's words lingered, casting a shadow over her time with Ethan. She became more guarded, pulling back and second-guessing the things she said and did around him. At one point, when Ethan playfully complimented her quirky interests, she dismissed it, brushing off his words with a laugh that felt hollow. Ethan noticed her distance and finally asked, "Is everything okay, Mia? You seem different lately." She tried to shake off the tension, but Derek's voice echoed in her mind. "People only stick around while you're interesting." Was she worth knowing if she wasn't glamorous, if she wasn't the confident influencer everyone else saw? Mia forced a smile and nodded, but deep down she felt the weight of her insecurities growing, threatening to drive a wedge between her and the one person who truly saw her. As she clung to Derek's cruel words, the double life she was leading began to feel more unsustainable than ever. Mia tried to push Derek's comments out of her mind, but his words continued to gnaw at her confidence. Every time she was with Ethan, she found herself questioning if he would still like her if he knew the whole truth. Ethan admired her for her simplicity, her honesty, and her quirks, the things she had hidden from the world for so long. But he had no idea about her influencer life, the polished, picture-perfect version of herself that dominated her social media feed. As she continued her experiment with Ethan, Mia also began spending more time on her influencer profile, interacting with fans, posting glamorous pictures, and responding to brands. The deeper she went into her relationship with Ethan, the more she felt the pressure to keep up appearances online. She was exhausted, living two lives that felt further and further apart. Then, one evening, as she and Ethan were sitting together at the coffee shop, Mia's phone buzzed with a notification. Her face flushed as she saw a comment from Derek on one of her recent posts. "Remember where you came from." His words were vague yet filled with a familiar venom, reminding her of everything she was trying to escape. She quickly put her phone down, hoping Ethan hadn't noticed her reaction, but the weight of Derek's reminder clung to her like a dark cloud. Ethan looked at her with concern. "Are you sure everything's okay?" he asked gently. "You seem distracted, more than usual." Mia forced a smile. "It's nothing, just work stuff." She hated lying to him, but she couldn't bring herself to explain the truth. Not now, not when everything felt so fragile. But Ethan wasn't convinced. He could sense something was wrong, something she wasn't telling him. The next day, as they spent time at the park, Mia's phone buzzed continuously. Notifications from her social media accounts were blowing up as her posts received more and more engagement. She noticed Ethan's glances each time she checked her phone, his subtle look of curiosity mixed with concern. Finally, he asked, "Mia, I don't mean to pry, but it seems like you're always caught up in work. Is there something you're not telling me?" Caught off guard, Mia hesitated, feeling the walls of her double life closing in on her. She wanted to come clean, to explain why she was living this dual existence, but the fear of losing Ethan was paralyzing. If he knew the truth, would he see her differently? Would he feel betrayed? "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But just as she was about to continue, her phone buzzed again. Another notification, another reminder of the world she was so desperately trying to balance. Ethan sighed, a look of disappointment flickering in his eyes. I thought we could be honest with each other." Mia's heart ached. Here was Ethan, the one person who made her feel like she could be herself, and she was on the verge of losing him. But she still couldn't bring herself to reveal her influencer life, not with the looming threat of Derek's comments and her fear of Ethan seeing her as someone shallow and fake. Their time together that day ended on a quiet, uncomfortable note. Mia could feel the distance growing between them, the rift created by her own insecurities and the secret she was hiding. As she watched Ethan walk away, she felt a crushing sense of guilt and regret. She was losing him, and it was entirely her own doing. Later that night, as she lay awake in bed, scrolling through her posts and reading the flood of comments, she realized just how trapped she was. The more she tried to keep up the facade, the more it cost her in her real life. She missed the simplicity of her time with Ethan, the honesty she felt when she was with him. But as much as she wanted to be free of her influencer persona, she wasn't sure she knew who she was without it. For the first time in years, Mia felt lost. The lines between her online persona and her true self were blurring, and she didn't know if she could untangle them. But as she looked at Ethan's name in her contacts, her heart sank. If she didn't find a way to come clean, she would lose the one real thing she had fought so hard to find. Days passed, and the tension between Mia and Ethan continued to grow. Mia felt herself pulling back more and more, trapped between her desire to be honest and her fear of rejection. She knew she couldn't keep this up forever. Something had to give. But she hadn't expected the truth to come out the way it did. One afternoon, Mia was scrolling through her social media feed, responding to comments and messages when she received a notification from a fan tagging her in a post. She opened it, her heart dropping as she saw what had been shared. A photo of her in the coffee shop with Ethan, taken by an unknown person. The caption read, "Spotted, the real Mia, caught without the glam." The post went viral almost immediately. Followers were commenting in shock, some defending her, others criticizing her appearance and calling her fake for presenting one version of herself online while hiding another. Mia's hands shook as she read through the comments, each one feeling like a dagger to her already fragile self-esteem. Before she could even process what had happened, her phone rang. It was Ethan. "Mia, what is this?" His voice was a mix of confusion and hurt, and Mia's heart sank. I just saw this post. I thought you said you were just a regular girl, someone who didn't care about impressing people. But I find out you're living this whole other life online." Mia tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She felt like her world was crumbling, her worst fear becoming a reality. Finally, she managed to say, "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way. I didn't know how to tell you." Ethan's silence was heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a quiet disappointment. "So, all this time, was it all just some kind of game? An experiment? Were you testing me to see if I would like you without knowing the real you?" "No, it's not like that," Mia pleaded, feeling tears sting her eyes. "I was so scared that if you knew who I really was, you'd only see me as some shallow, fake influencer. I thought you'd turn away, just like everyone else does when they see the real me." Ethan took a deep breath. "Mia, I thought I was seeing the real you. That's what hurts the most. I thought you trusted me enough to be yourself, but I guess I was wrong." Mia felt her heart shatter. Here she was, standing on the edge of the one genuine connection she had, and she was watching it slip away because of her own fear and insecurities. She wanted to beg Ethan to understand, to give her another chance, but she knew that her actions had already spoken louder than any apology she could offer. As Ethan ended the call, Mia was left staring at her reflection in the screen, the weight of her double life crashing down on her. For so long, she had hidden behind filters, makeup, and carefully crafted images, convinced that the only way to be loved was to be perfect. But now, the mask she'd worn for so long had not only shattered, it had taken everything she truly cared about with it. Mia knew she had to make a choice. She could continue down the path she'd been on, clinging to her influencer persona and the empty validation it provided. Or she could finally let go, embracing the raw, imperfect version of herself she'd been running from all along. Her heart ached at the thought of losing Ethan, but she realized that if she didn't change now, she'd keep losing pieces of herself. This was her moment of reckoning, and for the first time, Mia knew that her next step had to be one of courage, not fear. In the days that followed, Mia felt like she was walking through a fog. The fallout from the viral post lingered, with her followers' comments stinging more than she could have imagined. But it wasn't just the backlash online that hurt, it was the silence from Ethan. She missed their conversations, his warmth, and the way he had looked at her like she was worth knowing beyond appearances. Losing him was like losing a part of herself she hadn't known existed. For the first time in years, Mia forced herself to confront her fears head-on. She began reflecting on the journey that had led her here, the path of hiding behind perfection, of shaping herself into something she thought people wanted, of never believing she could be loved as she was. She knew now that if she wanted any real happiness, it would start with accepting herself. One evening, after hours of soul-searching, Mia sat down in front of her camera, this time without makeup or filters, and hit record. This wasn't just another post for likes or attention. It was a confession, an apology, and, most importantly, an acknowledgement of the person she wanted to become. "Hey, everyone," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "This is going to be a different kind of video. Some of you may know me as this confident influencer who seems to have it all together, but the truth is, I don't. I never have. For a long time, I've been hiding behind a version of myself that isn't real. I built this persona out of fear that if people saw the real me, they'd turn away." Mia paused, gathering her thoughts. "I started an experiment recently, trying to see if anyone could love me without the makeup, without the glam, just as I am. And in the process, I hurt someone I really cared about. I was so scared of being vulnerable, of being seen, that I ended up hiding from the one person who made me feel like I could be myself, and I lost him because of it." Her voice wavered as she continued, the raw emotion evident in her eyes. "To Ethan, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry. I was wrong to hide from you. You deserved honesty and I didn't give you that. I understand if you never want to see me again, but I needed to say this because it's time I stopped running." The video ended with Mia taking a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She had bared her soul to the world, exposed her insecurities and flaws in a way she had never done before. She didn't know how her followers or Ethan would react, but for the first time, she felt free. In the days following her video, Mia received an outpouring of messages from her followers. Some people unfollowed, disappointed by the revelation, but many others reached out, sharing their own struggles, their own fears of not being enough. Mia realized that for the first time she was connecting with her audience on a real level, not as a perfect influencer, but as a human being. Then, one afternoon, as she was reading through the comments, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat. It was a message from Ethan. "Can we talk?" Mia felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She didn't know if he was reaching out to reconcile or simply to close the chapter on their connection, but she knew she had to face him, whatever the outcome. They met at the same coffee shop where they'd first talked. As she walked in, Mia felt a pang of nostalgia, remembering how comfortable and free she had felt with him. Now, sitting across from him, she felt exposed, but determined to be honest. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "I watched your video." Mia nodded, her heart racing. "I meant every word of it, Ethan. I'm sorry for lying to you, for not trusting you enough to show you who I really was." Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze softening. "I just don't understand why you felt like you had to hide. You didn't need to be anyone but yourself." Mia felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I've spent so long thinking that the only way to be loved was to be perfect, to be someone everyone would want. But with you, you made me feel like I could just be me, and that terrified me. I didn't know how to trust it." Ethan looked down, as if searching for the right words. "Mia, I liked you because of the little things. The way you talked about those old keys you collect. The way you lit up when you shared your quirky interests. That was real. That was what I wanted to see." A tear slipped down Mia's cheek as she whispered, "I know, and I'm sorry for not believing it. I've learned a lot from this and I'm trying to change, but I understand if you can't forgive me." Ethan was silent for a moment, his gaze meeting hers. "Forgiving isn't the hard part, Mia. I just need to know that from here on we can be real with each other. No more masks, no more hiding." Mia nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. No more masks. As they left the cafe, she felt a glimmer of hope, a chance at rebuilding what they had lost, not through perfection, but through honesty. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it, one genuine step at a time. Over the next few weeks, Mia and Ethan slowly rebuilt their connection, this time on a foundation of honesty. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, times when the old insecurities threatened to resurface. But Mia was committed to breaking free from her past patterns, to letting go of the masks she had worn for so long. And Ethan, ever patient, gave her the space to heal, to discover who she truly was without the pressure of being perfect. Mia found herself returning to her social media presence with a new perspective. She no longer felt the need to present a flawless image or chase after endless likes and followers. Instead, she began sharing her journey of self-acceptance, opening up about her insecurities and the lessons she'd learned along the way. Her posts became less about projecting a perfect image and more about connecting with others on a genuine level. To her surprise, her audience responded with warmth, sharing their own stories and thanking her for her authenticity. One day, Ethan surprised her with a gift. As they sat together in the park, he pulled a small, intricately designed key from his pocket and handed it to her. It was similar to the one he had given her before, but this one had a small heart engraved in the center. Mia looked at the key, her heart swelling with emotion. "What's this for?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan smiled, a gentle, knowing look in his eyes. "It's for you, to remind you that you don't need to unlock anyone else's approval. You already have everything you need inside of you." Mia felt a tear slip down her cheek as she clutched the key in her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it held a profound meaning. She no longer needed validation from others. She could be enough, just as she was. As they sat together, Mia realized that for the first time, she felt truly free. She wasn't hiding behind a persona or seeking anyone's approval. She was just Mia, a young woman who had once been lost but had found herself in the process of letting go. Later that night, Mia posted a picture of the key Ethan had given her, along with a heartfelt message. She wrote about her journey, her struggles, and the painful yet beautiful lessons she had learned. Sometimes, we think we need to be perfect to be loved, but the truth is, love isn't about perfection. It's about accepting ourselves, flaws and all, and finding people who see the beauty in us even when we can't see it ourselves. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people who felt seen, understood, and inspired. Mia realized that in sharing her vulnerability, she had created a space where others could embrace theirs. As her online presence evolved into something deeper and more genuine, her relationship with Ethan blossomed. They supported each other's dreams, lifting each other up on the days when insecurities crept in. Ethan continued his work as a props designer, inspired by Mia's courage to be real. And Mia, with her newfound sense of self-worth, began creating content that was less about appearances and more about authenticity. In the months that followed, Mia's journey became a testament to the power of self-acceptance. She and Ethan grew closer, bound not by a need to impress one another but by a mutual understanding and respect. They had found something rare, love that was honest, vulnerable, and deeply rooted in the acceptance of each other's true selves. As Mia looked back on her journey, she realized that she had gained something more valuable than followers, fame, or admiration. She had gained a sense of self-worth that no amount of likes or comments could ever provide. She no longer needed to wear a mask or hide behind a perfect image. She was finally at peace with who she was, knowing that she was worthy of love just as she was. And as she held the key Ethan had given her, she knew it was more than just a symbol. It was a reminder of the courage it took to be real, to face her fears, and to find herself in the process. She had unlocked something far greater than she had ever imagined, a life filled with genuine love, both for herself and for the people who truly saw her. Mia had finally taken off the mask, and for the first time, she felt free.